Meanwhile, a federal judge has dismissed a lawsuit filed by the Justice Department to obtain Michigan's unredacted voter rolls. Michigan's Secretary of State argued the DOJ's request violated state and federal privacy laws. In its argument, the Justice Department cited several federal laws, including the Civil Rights Act of 1960 and the National Voter Registration Act. But the judge, a Trump appointee, ruled those laws, quote, do not allow the United States to obtain the records at issue. And so, amid Trump's recent call to, quote, nationalize elections, several top state election officials say the federal government has become hostile to them and their work, with one Secretary of State declaring, quote, we can't trust the federal government, and they are now adversaries of the states. That comment came from Maine's Secretary of State, Shenna Bellows, who joins us now. She's running as a Democratic candidate for governor of Maine. Well, first tell us what you think the risk might be right now to the midterms elections, especially in blue states.
Well, I think every election official in the country should be getting ready for what might come in 2026. And, election officials are the world's best contingency planners. Generally, we're preparing for potential natural disasters, more recently threats against election officials or swatting or bomb threats. Now we have to safeguard against federal interference in our elections because of what we are seeing from the White House.
So, Secretary Bellows, can you speak to the relationship that you once had with federal election officials and now that has become fractured, something John is writing about here, what a normal relationship looks like between a Secretary of State in Maine, for example, and federal election officials, and what it looks like now?
So I used to chair the National Election Security and Cybersecurity Partnership with the federal government, states, and locals. They participated in helping us train our local election officials to safeguard their own safety and the safety of the polling places. When I was swatted in 2023, the feds were there to help. And when there were white powder mailings to all of the election officials, they were there to support. But in 2025, about a year ago, they zeroed out all election security and cybersecurity funding to the states, leaving us on our own. And then last summer, DOJ came in demanding the voter data from every state, wanting to build a national voter database. When I told them to jump in the Gulf of Maine, they sued. They sued multiple states. Of course, we're winning, as you reported earlier today. But then seeing Pam Bondi on the eve of Alex Preddy's murder, sending a letter to Minnesota saying that ICE would leave Minnesota if they turned over their voter rolls. And then most recently, the seizure of ballots and ballot materials in Fulton County, not only by the FBI, but by Tulsi Gabbard, the nation's top domestic spy official. So all of this pattern demonstrates that we can no longer trust the federal government to help us. They are trying to nationalize the elections. They're trampling on our constitutional rights, and we have to safeguard against them.
So, Madam Secretary, it was your quote to my colleagues and I at The Atlantic about the trust being destroyed became the headline of our story about this very issue. I know there's a White House meeting scheduled for later this month. Election officials, state officials having some real thoughts about whether they would go to the White House to talk about election security. Tell us your thoughts on that, but also what other steps can you take to prepare as the White House, which has a standing weekly meeting now about both looking back towards 2020 election, but also looking forward to 26 and 28 as they prepare, as some have speculated, to even deploy troops to the streets or lean on the states for voter roll information. What more can you do to push back between now and November?
So I think there are three things that we can do. First and foremost, we have to be really aggressive in the courts, and the states are winning. Yesterday, we won in Michigan. Last week, we won in Oregon, the week before in California. So being very assertive and bold in going to the courts, because Article 1, Section 4 of the Constitution could not be more clear that it's states, not the federal government, that are in charge of our elections. But second, it's really about looking at our state and federal laws and looking at policies and procedures. Every election, I train my clerks and local law enforcement about what the laws are and what the procedures are at the polling places. So, for example, in 2024, we trained folks on what to do if there was swatting. And then when there was swatting in 6 of our polling locations, we were ready and voting was uninterrupted. So we'll need to do training for our clerks, for our local and state law enforcement. And then finally, it's going to be up to the people and making sure that we are making voting as accessible as possible to every single citizen in this country. Because the reason they're doing all of this is they are terrified of losing. You know, President Trump is like the world's worst ex-boyfriend. He cannot get over the fact that the country broke up with him in 2020, and he keeps going back to that. And unfortunately, all the people around him are now buying into these conspiracies, but with the goal of trying to disrupt and change the results in 2026.
Madam Secretary, can I ask you about another subject that you've been involved in and that we've been talking about this morning, which is the ICE activity around the country? ICE had targeted Maine. What is the situation with ICE activity in your state at the moment? Have they pulled back at all in the last week or two? And what can officials like yourself do about the ICE presence in the state?
So ICE did surge in Maine the day after MLK Day in a grotesquely named Operation Catch of the Day. It was really, truly horrible. They absolutely brought chaos and violence to our streets, snatching people out of their cars, detaining people who are legally here, breaking a car window, a dad and mom bringing their newborn home from an appointment, and they smashed the glass. It went all over the newborn's car seat. So really horrible stuff here on the ground. The Republicans and Senator Susan Collins panicked because the response from the public was immediate. People were so angry. So she called Kristi Noem and said, please, please stop ICE. I think she's panicked that she's going to lose in 2026. Unfortunately, we still are seeing arrests and detentions just yesterday in our communities. So it's not that they're truly gone, but we aren't seeing the same level of violence. Now, I run the Bureau of Motor Vehicles. When we heard that ICE was coming to Maine, U.S. Customs and Border Protection asked for undercover license plates. And I said, no, there are no secret police in a democracy.
Secretary of State for Maine and Democratic candidate for Governor Shenna Bellows, thank you very much for coming on the show. Come back and keep us posted.